Hello folks, this is Dave. I recently watched a video by Orlando of A Collector's Dream where he showed cards that came from cereal and other food products. And I collected cards in the late 50s and early 60s initially. So what I thought of immediately was my Post baseball cards. But I also recalled some football cards that were also produced by Post. So here are the set of 1962 Post football cards. And so they came on boxes of Post cereals, obviously. And there were 6 cards to a box, I think, typically. If you had smaller boxes like grape nuts, who likes those? There may have been 2 or 4 cards to a box then. And I believe also that boxes of Jell-O had a card on it, 1 card on the back. You can see they're about the size of a box of Jell-O. And I believe there was 1 card in the back of those. So I just counted. I have 183 of these. You can see here is the Packers. They tended to number them by teams, as Topps did in the 60s. There's Paul Hornung, Jim Taylor, the prominent one there, Roosevelt Brown. Some giant stars here: Andy Robustelli, Roosevelt Greer, Sam Huff. Cal Rote was an announcer on TV for many years. Some Eagles. I like Chuck Bednarik, was a famous two-way player in the 50s and 60s. Some good players here. Sonny Jurgensen went on to play with the Washington football team, Detroit Lions, Howard Hopalong Cassidy, Dick Night Train Lane, Alex Karras. And here is some Browns. Jim Brown, of course, great card here. Earl Morrall with the Lions also went on to play with the Baltimore Colts. Here are more of the Browns cards. Milt Plum was a good quarterback in those days. We get into some of the Baltimore Colt cards. Art Donovan was a great lineman, defensive lineman mostly, and Ray Berry, who hooked up with Johnny Unitas, who you can see here in the bottom left. Lenny Moore, good back with them. Jim Parker, also a great defensive tackle. Get into the 49ers. 49ers, interestingly, had 2 quarterbacks in that era. Bill Kilmer there on the left and John Brodie on the right. I think Kilmer also went on later with the Washington football team. The rest of the 49ers, I remember R.C. Owens. He did alley-oop catches where Kilmer Brodie would throw really high, and he was so tall, 6'3", but had great jumping ability. He could go up over the DBs, and they called it alley-oops. And then start getting into the Chicago Bears. Mike Ditka in the lower right there. Some more Bears. Bill Wade was a quarterback I remember back in those days, and started getting into the Pittsburgh Steelers. It didn't have a really great team back in that era. John Henry Johnson there on the left was a really good back for them. Here's more of the Steelers and getting into the Cowboys, the early Cowboys cards. Must have been close to their inception. There's Don Meredith and Bob Lilly. Some more of the Cowboys and getting into the St. Louis Cardinals. More Cardinals. Larry Wilson was a good defensive back for them. And then you see some Los Angeles Rams there on the left, upper left. John Arnett was one of my favorite players. The Rams were my favorite team back in those days. We lived in the state of Washington, had no football team, so I gravitated to the Rams. John Arnett was a great offensive back and actually played defensive back. Here's more of the Rams. think my favorite player on the Rams then was Les Richter, there on the lower left. Just a great defensive player, linebacker, also played on the offensive line, a two-way player. I remember one game I was watching TV, and this memory, I've tried to find an old clip of it. If I ever find it, I'm going to show it on the channel. But he was pulling and going around the left end against Baltimore Colts and blocked two Colt defensive linemen at the same time, Big Daddy Lipscomb, and I can't remember who else the other one was, maybe Gino Marchetti. Just a really great player. And I remember that because I was an offensive lineman in high school. So one of my favorite players. Here we're getting into the Minnesota Vikings. See Hugh McElhaney there in the middle left. He graduated from my alma mater and my father's alma mater, and my father always said that he actually went to school with him. I'm not certain if he was in the same class. My dad was an art major, so it maybe makes sense that a football player might take art. But he's a Hall of Famer. Getting toward the bottom of these, so more of the Vikings and getting into the Washington football team. Here is the rest of the Washington team. And finally, my 1962 post-serial football cards. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Y'all come back now. Here.